Hello and welcome to The Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette, and we're talking about something positive for Manchester United. Finally, we have what Rob was there for the Brentford game the other day, Saturday, a 2-1 win, Scott McTominay's injury time double, and I believe they call it limbs, Rob.
Oh God, limbs indeed. Like limbs that's the minimum way of describing it. Just an amazing few minutes at Old Trafford after a kind of strange football match again for Manchester United. But just the most glorious way to kind of end a football match. Yes, people say that it was only Brentford, but we know how badly this Manchester United team is struggling. And my God, did they need those few moments from Scott McTominay.
Yeah, we'll talk about just how much of a difference that win could make to, well, we're in a 2-week international break now, or near enough 2-week international break. Can you imagine the difference if that hadn't happened? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the performance of even Harry Maguire as well. We'll talk about Erik Ten Hag. We'll talk Casemiro, who is maybe not so many positives, but we'll have that conversation, and we'll talk a bit of Rafa Varane as well. But yeah, we'll be looking back at that game and the significance of what it means moving forward, because we have obviously an international break coming up, so we'll save some other stuff for later shows. So tune in. We usually do Tuesdays and Fridays. Subscribe wherever you get your pods, and watch us on YouTube as well, The Promised Land, a Manchester United podcast. And like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video on YouTube. Follow us on social media as well at @Scott Saunders, at @Rob_B, and at Promised Land MU for the show as well. So my first section heading here, Rob, is unlikely heroes, because they kind of are, really. Scott McTominay obviously gets a lot of stick. We'll start with him. Gets a lot of stick, and you probably Ten Hag needed that win. I don't really think you can give him too much credit for throwing on Scott McTominay, because United essentially just went into, God, we need to win mode, we need to score mode, and I think that's what we saw. It was like for the free kick for the second goal was like long ball lofted into the box, knocked down, header, that kind of thing. And it's not really too much you can read into it tactically, but in terms of the significance of the actual goals being scored, I think Scott McTominay said that was one of his favorite moments on a football pitch, if not his favorite moment on a football pitch, which sums up the situation.
I think it was one of my favourite moments in recent memory, totally, in terms of how the stadium reacted and how we all felt when Scotty put that second header in the top corner. Do you know what, Scott? Like in the last show, we talked a lot about the fringe, didn't we? We did a show about selection and about failing stars and, you know, who should you bring in? And I was quite radical in how I approached that and said, like, you know, you need to use players from the fringe. It doesn't mean that I believe that Harry Maguire, Scott McTominay, you know, Johnny Evans, these players are your long-term answers. But sometimes in a moment, Scott, needs must. And you just need to push and push hard. And sometimes you need to look down your squad list to find your hero. That's how it works. Think about when United won the treble. You know, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was not a starter at Manchester United, was he? He was a substitute. You know, he was someone actually on the fringe in many ways. He was the fourth choice striker in many people's eyes. But I think bringing on Scotty in those moments, you know, like especially, you know, right at the end of the football match, there was at least a genuine urgency from Manchester United to rescue themselves. And that's why in that roll of the dice, you know, we were in Las Vegas, weren't we? Roll those two dices. Man United somehow rolled 2 6s. Amazing moment, really. And just that they really wanted it, Scott. And you saw with the celebration at the end there where they all came together and the whole stadium was with them. Like we were all one, you know, 75,000 people and that football team. And all of the stuff that's been going on for weeks, Scott, with, I don't know, ownership, players, who's going to do what in the future, injury crises, all of that got wiped away in the split second because Manchester United showed their personality, or the personality that we want them to show, and they were rewarded and we were rewarded. So just an amazing moment at Old Trafford. Yes, it was only Brentford, but I really do believe that the managers' obituaries were being written by editors across the land here in this country about how Ten Hag was going to either get sacked during the international break, or at least there was going to be calls for him to be sacked on every TV station, every radio station across the universe. And somehow these players pulled that rabbit out of the hat. And yeah, you just said this, Scott. It's been quiet last 2-3 days, isn't it? And it would have been bedlam for us in this industry. It would have just been non-stop about who you're going to change, who the new manager is going to be, and what Man United should do. He bought himself a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, he did. And for me, I was watching that game the other day. Obviously, my experience was a lot different to yours. I wasn't there, but I was seeing, I was scrolling through socials and that kind of thing, and it was this team, they've given up on another manager, they're throwing another manager under the bus, this kind of thing. I haven't felt that at all yet. Like, I don't think that is the case. What I think we're seeing, and the reason why United are losing, I think there's players in there who are either incapable of doing what the manager wants them to do, or are just a bit careless, or are kind of in the team based on stature and reputation, as opposed to, and we talked about meritocracy and that kind of thing. And I don't think maybe Ten Hag is selling himself short there in a sense, because he keeps picking players who aren't really putting in the performances he needs. But he did address that a few days ago as well, and said that players eventually run out of credit. So we'll talk about running out of credit later on with regard to Casemiro. I don't want to dig out Casemiro, but we did speak when we signed him.
We have to talk about him.
We will.
We got pulled. He got pulled at half time. So yeah, you're right about the running out of credit line. I think that's really important for Ten Hag.
Yeah. So, but I think the point I'm trying to make there is that I have not seen these players give up yet. What I'm seeing is silly mistakes, house of cards falling down. When you make one mistake, everything else underneath it falls apart. And Erik ten Hag actually says that publicly, that it's about everybody from front to back has to defend. Everybody from front to back, you work as a team, you play together as a team, this kind of thing. And if somebody makes one mistake, the house of cards falls down. And I think we saw that again with Casemiro giving the ball away just carelessly in midfield. Then United make one mistake. Lindelof doesn't really clear it that well. Onana can't save the ball. We won't talk Onana today, but it's there's definitely causes for concern there, but I don't think it's because of an attitude. I think this is Ten Hag working with players that perhaps are not ideal fits for what he wants to do in the long term. That's kind of how I saw it. But obviously, significant weekend as well. Emotional weekend, really, at Old Trafford, with Lady Kathy Ferguson passing away as well. That I believe it was the day before. We've also had, there was that feeling of emotion there. I know Scott McTominay posted on his own socials, with a picture of him and Sir Alex Ferguson, saying, "This one was for you, boss," and he's not the only player to have done that either. And it was an emotional day all around. And I think to tie in, he actually said he watched the David Beckham documentary as well, which is a reminder of what United used to be like for all these players. So that was obviously fresh in the mind, and I think we saw a little bit of that on Saturday as well. So the feeling could be so different if that hadn't happened. But yeah, I just rambled on a bit there, Rob.
No, it's interesting that the Beckham documentary has kind of come at exactly the same time as this result in the manner that it has. It's almost like a carbon copy of Barcelona, isn't it? When the Champions League, obviously the stakes completely different. But it is about attitude, Scott. And you just said there about players running out credit and whatnot. We live in a football world now where kind of populism reigns supreme, where fans have favourites. And that's how teams are picked in fans' heads and on all of these things. And a lot of the stuff that maybe we see in terms of mistakes or one thing or another don't get highlighted, but maybe don't get analysed in the way that they should do, because people just gravitate towards other players and they stick with that. They don't really want to look any deeper than that. Like you just mentioned Onana there. I will say something about Onana, is that, he should save that goal. There's no doubt about it. He can get his hand on it. He just has to push it away. But I think, again, it's absolutely what we said in the previous show. What I said was that he's a rabbit in headlights. So at the moment, things in front of him are not working. And he's a bit like, what have I signed for here? Oh, my God, I don't have protection. I don't have the things I need. Funnily enough, I think as the game went on, United did get better after that goal, certainly in the second half, and did their jobs at centre-back positions. And that helped Tanana. But I just think, like Ten Hag now, if he's going to fix this going forward, and this result can be a catalyst for that, he's going to have to shake it up. Is that the starting lineups are going to not look familiar to a lot of Man United fans. That he's going to have to do one or two things every now and then until players are fully fit. Because at the moment, the same old guard, the ones with all the medals in their pockets, Scott, are not doing it. They're not cutting it. It's just the bottom line. And I think now the manager might well have learned that. It doesn't mean let's start Scott McTominay every game. That doesn't mean that. But do you know what? Scott McTominay's a really well in an advanced position for Scotland. Maybe we play him there for a little bit, give him a go, let him support Højlund, find ways of doing it. Or do you just pick Rashford every week? Or do you just pick the same player every week? Just pick Bruno Fernandes. Don't even question it because they're your best players. So, yeah, we can talk through a little bit of that today.
Yeah, obviously that's bought Ten Hag time.
Yeah.
You and I have both been firmly, most United fans are firmly behind the manager still. I think obviously he's getting a lot of criticism. I don't think if they'd have lost that game that he would have gone in this international break. I don't think we're there yet, but I feel like the noise would have just cranked up a few decibels. And inevitably we've seen other managers over the past few years hit that position, and then it's just a slippery slope to a sacking. But I feel like you could see with Ten Hag's celebration there, he knew that he needed that. He felt that he needed that. He kind of lost his own head as it was, just like everybody else on the ground did. But it's so important for him because it buys him a bit of time, buys him a bit of alleviates the pressure a little bit. He's now not got to deal with a press conference for the next 2 weeks or something like that and get grilled. He can just bury his head, get his head down, and try and work with the players that he has on the training pitch to try and stop making some of the errors that he has. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, some injuries will clear up. United again they actually did. They didn't do exactly what I asked them to do, but they did play. They played Victor Lindelof at left back. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Johnny Evans came in with Varane out injured again, but they put Amrabat in the midfield. That we asked for that, didn't we?
Yeah.
What do you think made a difference?
What, Amrabat playing midfield?
Yeah.
I think it did. And I think this was the thing is that Ten Hag, as being a conservative coach, tends to kind of work things out in a systematic order. So like we all highlighted that. We all wanted to see Amrabat start in midfield. And we said, well, this is the kind of radical option. This is what I would do. It's what I was saying in the last show. And then we were like, what he'll probably do is play 4-2-3-1 with Casemiro. That's how he's going to start. That's what he does. So he did that, didn't he? And the first half didn't work. And he pulled Casemiro. And I think in the second half, playing Amrabat as a single pivot worked really well. It kind of nullified what Brentford were trying to do on the front foot. And Amrabat, again, I think, travels beautifully around the area. He's combative. He wants to do all that kind of work, the dog's work, as I like to describe it. And that gave Eriksen more room to work in, to go kind of get the ball on the deck and play a little bit more. You also saw Bruno in the second half invert a lot more and come into the central midfield rather than holding some of the width. So I think, again, Amrabat playing central midfield. Now, if I'm the manager, I'm thinking he has to play there now. Like, I don't care if I'm playing whoever at left back. I have to find a way to keep this guy in the central pivot. And that central pivot is not Casemiro +1. It's Amrabat +1. That's the way it might end up having to be. So, yeah, like you just said about buying time and stuff, there's no doubt that for 2 weeks till the next Man United game, all the noise would have been, like you said, it would have gone up a level. It would have gone up 25 levels. It would have just been every back page about how do you sack this manager and who's going to be the next manager. And that's where we've been going. And my post-match analysis, I was thinking, you're going to have to start writing caveats, Rob, saying, well, the team's not playing well. Then, yeah, you might have to consider changing the manager. But I don't want that. And I know you don't, Scott. And I think most normal Man United fans don't want that. But I think, he bought himself time. But I think we also saw some hope. There's something in there. Like if you get your players back, your injured players, that there are players also in the background who are not being used, like the Maguires, like the Evans, that will put in the shifts for you to get you over the line, to keep you getting points. And that will buy you more time.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen I know this is a different kettle of fish completely, but Man City have been without Kevin De Bruyne. They were without Rodri the other day in the defeat to Arsenal. and they don't play they couldn't play the same way.
Nope.
United without their entire back four, and they have been for most of the season. They just don't have a first choice 11. And I don't want to keep jumping on this, but Erik ten Hag bought Lisandro Martinez to start with because that is a footballer that can actually take the ball under pressure in central defense and pass the ball forward. And he's stuck with a 35-year-old Johnny Evans, Harry Maguire, who, he played well, and he's played well in the last couple of appearances, but he specifically bought Martinez to progress that area, and he's having to deal with a 35-year-old and Harry Maguire, who were in a centre-back pairing at Leicester City a few years ago. He's got a centre-back at left-back, and he's got Dalot, who, arguably, maybe you could say he's first choice, but I think me and you would both pick Wan-Bissaka to start with. So that's the first choice back four that's not there. The other injuries seem to be clearing up a bit, and hopefully we'll get... I don't think Reguilon's going to be ready for the Sheffield United game, but hopefully somebody will get back to play in at left-back naturally soon enough. But yeah, Ten Hag he needs a bit of time, and I think he's bought it. It's also worth shouting out here, by the way, this isn't a shout out. This is not a shout out, but how do United even consider sacking Ten Hag when they have a financial position like they have? They talk about financial fair play. He's on a big contract. I know he's got 18 months left plus a year, but that's going to be a hefty payout, and then you have to bring in another manager, possibly for a release clause, this kind of thing. So I don't think we were there. I don't think we would have been there, but the pressure, it just eats you up, doesn't it? Once that pressure mounts up, it can eat up most people. And Ten Hag was so evidently relieved that that happened because it just eased some of the pressure. And United are 6 points off Man City now when they're playing them in a couple of weeks at Old Trafford. So it's funny how things turn. If United beat City in a couple of weeks' time, which they did last season, be 3 points off City after 10 games.
Well,
so
then,
it's
it was only 2 or 3 weeks ago. People were saying to me, "Give Ten Hag a new contract because he might go to Bayern Munich," and I was like, "No, just calm it down. Like, let's talk about stuff later in the season or at the end of the season." And I think that's also the correct, frugal way to run your business. You don't need to be knee-jerking some of those contractual things. As you said, you give a manager a new contract and then you're sacking him within 6 months. Not really the right way. I think with Ten Hag, the right thing to do with him is say, earn it. We want you to stay here. We like you. We want you to carry on the project. But you got to earn it. We've got to see in the next few months that these players continue to play for you. And I think it's also, Scott, this is also about squad management in the sense that people always used to accuse Ole Gunnar Solskjaer of favouritism with players. And I used to say it wasn't favouritism. It's just who he trusted. And I think Ten Hag is caught in that kind of loop as well, is that he trusts certain players. He looks at them and says, I know you can do that. I know you can do that. Football's not always a perfect circle. Sometimes you have to kind of, do things to make it work. Look at Guardiola against Arsenal. He couldn't make his illustrious treble-winning squad work on the day, could he? It just didn't work for them. And Arsenal, who've got injuries as well, did make it work just a little bit more and won the game. So United are in that position for me, is that, as you just said there, you're not far off Man City, but to me, that doesn't really mean a lot. What I'm looking at here is the game-to-game progression. And can you do something that might not be pretty, but you're doing the right things to make sure you're not losing football matches. Just highlight as well there, Scott, in the game, like the goal. Like we talked about Casemiro just a little bit there and the goal. There was like 4 mistakes before Onana's soft hand, you could say. And that, again, has been Man United's problem, isn't it? It's that you get like 4 individual errors in the blink of an eye and you kind of think to yourself, can you just stop it? Can you just stop the bleeding sometimes? And I think that's what Ten Hag has to work on, is to make sure these players are, I don't know, more prepared. I don't know if he can do that.
He says that in every single meeting with the media. He says we have to do the basics 100% of the time. We have to be concentrating 100% of the time because that is imperative to how his teams will play. And that's, United have fallen behind in a hell of a lot of games this season, and they're always chasing. They always seem to be chasing. They went ahead at Arsenal and lost, but at the same time, that is a game against Arsenal. But they've had decent spells in some matches, but conceded because they've been careless. And then that's completely flipped the perception of like what United are trying to achieve and like how people are judging this season. Obviously, they're going to get criticism. They believe 10th in the league or wherever they are. But I think there are massive problems there. But I think if you fix them, you might see a sharp improvement. I don't know. Definitely. I don't know.
Yeah, look, and I think the time has come now to stop relying on the players who are your big wage earners, your illustrious flag wavers in terms of, the popularity. And, oh, look, I've got 5 Champions League medals in my pocket. Well, these things do not count for anything when you can't handle Brentford in midfield. So, like, this is, you have to work within the realms of reality, don't you? And build around that. We talked briefly as well about Evans and Maguire. The reason why they've come out of this game with a bit of credit, Scott, is because they did do the basics. They did. And watching Johnny Evans, right, from my seat, because he was on my side of that side of the pitch, is that you watch what Johnny Evans does. Johnny Evans is thinking, I'm not going to get run here, so I'm going to make sure the space between me and mainly Mbeumo, or sometimes Wissa, or sometimes one of the midfielders or the fullbacks, I'm going to give myself the room to see what's happening. So I will step off a little bit. And that's what you want. Whereas Lindelof, on the opposite, does the opposite and goes too hard, too fast, gets caught, and then gets done. So that's why I was saying play Johnny Evans, because Johnny Evans is good at the basics. Is he old? Yes. Is he top quality? Probably not. But he knows that. He's got the experience. And that's why he put in a good performance, Scott. That's why I think as the manager, you have to look at those things now and say, right, it's not my first choice, but I know this player, his skill set is X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to play on that and lean on that. And I think that's what happened in the second half. There was a shift. The first half felt very dysfunctional and same old, same old. You conceded a goal. Felt like Crystal Palace. Second half, Man United did chase the game, and they chased it better. I think when they made the substitutes, Garnacho on the far side for Rashford, I think those changed the ethics of the game. And it meant in the last few minutes, Scott, you could rescue yourself.
You mentioned Casemiro. We said we'd talk about him.
Yeah.
I did a tweet the other day. You're seeing Jude Bellingham scoring every other game or every single game for Real Madrid.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the endless cycle United have been stuck in. And I'll say this, right? I think Casemiro is great. I have fully backed him for the duration of like his United career so far. Even at the start of the season, I said, give him some time. I would like to see, because I feel like the gap in midfield is just too much for him to deal with at the minute. But the fact of the matter is now I've had more time to watch him, and he's making too many errors, and it's meaning United can see goals. And it's not agendas. It is not. No. It's just I'm calling what I see here.
It's football.
And I watched Brighton play. I watched Brighton play Liverpool on Sunday, right? And I saw Carlos Baleba. They've just signed him from the French league, and they think this kid is going to be better than Moises Caicedo. That's what they've been talking about. I think they signed him for 25 million or something like that.
Yeah,
he made some mistakes, obviously, but he came in. Brighton have signed him because of the profile that he has. He's able to take the ball. He's able to turn out of pressure. He's able to pass out of pressure. He's able to progress the ball up the pitch. And United do not have that kind of presence in there at the moment. Casemiro can't do it. Casemiro is very much, I'll hold in the midfield and hopefully keep an anchor and keep a base. But the fact of the matter is, when he gets the ball under pressure, he gives the ball away. And we've started to see that a lot more as well. And talking about when credit runs out for players, I think we've seen Ten Hag persist with Casemiro over the last few weeks. But I think hooking him at half-time and then saying, I wanted more football in bringing Christian Eriksen on, it might be the end of Casemiro's credit for a little while. I'm not sure.
I think it should be at the very least. Like sometimes with players, it's can't do or won't do. And I think with Casemiro, it's not won't do. It's not about his attitude. It's not really about, can he be bothered? Like I think towards the end of Ronaldo at Man United, it kind of felt like it won't do. It was like Ronaldo was just like, well, I'm done here. Hands on hips. I'm just going to live in this world for a bit. I earn quite a lot of money. I'm fine. I'm going to go when I want to go. I think with Casemiro, and we said this again before, is that the Premier League is a beast in midfield. It's really difficult to cope in there. And I think he's trying to cope. And in fact, Scott, in that moment where he gave the ball away, what did he do? He overcommitted. He gave the ball away and he just has to stand on his feet. Stand on your feet and keep that space and go and address the player. Make them go around you. Don't let them skip past you. And what did he do? He dives in. We know that Casemiro, since day dot, dives in, and we've said stop diving in Casemiro. So he dives in and you get punished. So this is why we are going to talk continuously on this show for the rest of the season about Kobe Manu and about Hannibal and about players like that. Is that it doesn't mean they're better than Casemiro in the grand schemes of football, but they're better for you. They're better for what you're trying to do. And it is better that kids make mistakes, Scott, than 5 times Champions League winners. It is. Because at least with kids, you go, well, we're building them up. We're getting somewhere, and you're not building anything with Casemiro up. He's on a one-way ticket to Saudi Arabia. He will not be at the football club by the end of the season. But I would not even be surprised if something happens in the January window and he goes, I'm done here. I'm not playing anymore. I'm on the bench. This is boring. I'm not going to play any more games for the rest of the season. I'm coming on for 10, 15, 20 minutes to plug holes. And I don't want that because, I'm an illustrious footballer and someone's offering me £300,000-400,000 a week to go and play in their new league. So I think that's the way it's going to go. And I think that's the only way it can go. I think you have to stick now with your fringier players and your young players and find a method to cope towards the next transfer window. And yes, Scott, you're going to have to go and do a Brighton. You're going to have to find these players in the 20 to 30 million pound bracket that you can build up and make better. Like, we've got to stop all this Galactico nonsense. It doesn't work at Man United. It hasn't worked for 10 years. You have to find the balance. Buy some stars every now and then, but buy some players that can operate in your squad week to week.
I think the midfield is the most important area for that as well, really, because there's the profile of a central midfielder nowadays is just, you have to be able to do everything. You have to have the energy. Absolutely. You have to have the ability to dribble with the ball. You have to have the ability to pass the ball. You have to have defensive now, so you have to be able to get forward and backwards.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying at all, like, Casemiro has he did his job last season. He absolutely did. He came in and he made a hell of a difference to the team. He did. But we flagged at the time, Rob, we're giving him a 4-year deal. I think it was on $350 a week or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a time where we have to have this conversation. We had that conversation at the time of his signing, and then he made a hell of a difference, and we quietened down for a while because it looked like it was working. But the fact of the matter is, we were always going to come to this point. I think we've probably come to this point a little bit sooner than we'd have hoped. But, we have to have that conversation. I'm sure Erik ten Hag is probably looking at that and thinking, yeah, I should probably address that in the midfield. I'm not saying Casemiro will never start a game again for United, but I think you've got to be looking beyond this and looking at the profile of a Premier League midfielder now and thinking, God, I need to get 1 or 2 of them. I think Kobe will play I'm quite high on Kobe. It's a lot of pressure to put on a young lad, but I think he can probably make a difference in there. I think if he'd have been fit from the start of the season, we'd have actually seen him in the midfield quite a bit.
Yeah.
But just so happens that we haven't. And United have this attitude for years of, let's go buy Casemiro. Right, they did. Look at Real Madrid. I came to this point just now. Jude Bellingham is scoring 10 goals or 8 goals, or however many goals he's got. Every single week he's scoring a goal for Real Madrid. Behind him, he's got Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Valverde, prime midfielders of the modern age who are going to be midfielders of the modern age for the next 10 years. United, meanwhile, have been buying their cast-offs. And Real Madrid were delighted to sell Casemiro for 70 million quid at 29, 30 years old. They were absolutely delighted to do it. United fell for it. And that's the difference between how Real Madrid run and how Man United run. And I feel like United have to be more sensible and less panicky in the future because they bought Casemiro on a whim. They thought, oh God, we've just lost 4-0 to Brentford. We have to do something. And they did. Made a difference for a while, but, they've caused a problem for themselves in the long run, which I'm sure they can fix. You just talked about Saudi Arabia, Rob. And I feel like I would be shocked if that didn't happen. I would be absolutely shocked. But
it's happening already.
it's sorry, I just rambled on a bit there, but you know what I'm trying to say. And I do not want people to come in and say, oh, you're writing off Casemiro. You're saying that he's useless and this kind of thing. I think he's done his job. He did his job last season for United, but he tailed off. And if you're building a squad that can compete at the very top level for the next 5-10 years, it was a stopgap signing.
Definitely. And I think if we want to look at this forensically, Scott, because again, a lot of people say to me, Casemiro was great last year. No, Casemiro was great for about 25 games. That's the truth. Casemiro came into the team. Do you remember there was an extended stay where you couldn't get in the team? He came into the team. He improved us massively, and he improved us for about a 25 to 30 game spell. And at the end of the season, if anyone was watching Casemiro's performance really closely, Casemiro was garbage. He was not good after he came back. But I think, again, because he'd built up a little bit of credit and he's Casemiro, we were like, well, you have to run with it. And you didn't have choices, did you? So, like, you have to go with it. It's where you were. Casemiro had that spell of 25 to 30 games, and it helped Man United get in the top four massively. He was a huge part of that. You paid 350 grand a week for that privilege, and you paid Real Madrid 60 million pound for a reserve. So Real Madrid, I know when that happened, the reason why I was a little bit hesitant was people I know at Madrid and in La Liga were saying to me, why are Man United buying this player for 60 million? Like, we know he's got medals, but like, this is the end of his career, and he's now going to the Premier League, which is tougher than La Liga, and he can't get in our team. So, good luck to you, Man United. That's how I felt. Looking at it, obviously Casemiro for a short spell helped us, didn't he? But Casemiro can no longer help us, Scott. Like, you're just saying there, you're not going to say it. I'm going to say it. He probably shouldn't start again. Like, I don't think he's got the engine to do that job. Or, he's got the faculties, he's got the skill levels, but we're already seeing Casemiro defer the 6 to go play higher up the pitch because there's less risk up there. So I can score a goal now and then, so I'll get forward a little bit more and I can do that. So I'm not trying to bash Casemiro. What I'm saying is he just can't help you. Just cannot. So he's going to have to sit on the bench, and he will not want to sit on the bench. That's it. Simple as that. And it'll be him pushing to leave the football club as much as Man United saying we're not going to start you. And there will be games you start, Scott, but only just because of injuries and needs must and whatever. But I'm already looking at it and I'm saying Amrabat +1. And that +1 for me is not Casemiro at the moment. Like, I don't know about you. Like, I don't think people can watch it and go, yeah, Amrabat solves Casemiro's issues. No, Amrabat solves Man United's deeper midfield issues in terms of work rate and getting the ball on the deck and progressing it. Casemiro, unfortunately, now is a very, very expensive mistake that a year ago was okay, but now it's come to fruition way too quickly that looks like his time is done, I think, in the Premier League. That's the way I read it.
Yeah, obviously we have 3 months before a transfer window opens. Well, in England anyway. I'm not sure of the Saudi windows, but that will go that's on the horizon. It's on the horizon.
Click. It will go so quick. It will be like we'll be in January transfer window chat so soon. And again, if he's not playing, I do not think he's going to say, yeah, I'll sit on the bench for the rest of the season. I think he will be saying, I've got offers and, it's my reputation and my bank balance. I'm not saying he's not committed to Man United, but I do think there will come a point where we are going to have to go with Manu as maybe your main number 8, which is crazy at this age. But I'm good with that. Like, it's like Garnacho.
Well, I made the comparison last week, Rob. I know PSG lost, they got thumped at Newcastle, but look at Zaire Emery in that midfield. He's been playing. He's one of the hot prospects to come out of that academy, one of the best prospects to come out of that academy for years.
Yeah.
And he's already 16, 17 playing first-team football. So if you're good enough, you can.
Why is Barcelona? Why is Barcelona's play kids? Like, everyone lauds it and goes, "Oh, for years," and yet we can't play kids when we think that they're off that standard. It's a weird little comparison for me, and it's that Kobe Manu doesn't got the medals yet, but you want Kobe Manu to be your Jude Bellingham. You want to big him up now and push him forward, and not put the weight of the football club on him, Scott, but play him. Give him minutes. So I think when he comes back now, and he will come back very soon, he's obviously training, I think we're going to see plenty of Kobe Manu in the central midfield. And do you know what, Scott? If he makes mistakes, so what? Play him. Give him the confidence to get the ball on the deck and get you going. I think United fans will be really excited by his style of play with Amrabat. I think Manu and Amrabat could be a really dynamic midfield that get Man United back on track.
You just said the word dynamic with a Man United midfield. Like
weird, isn't it? Like, and that's why I like Hannibal, because I think he brings that dynamism to the team. Like he comes in there with a kind of like chip on his shoulder type player, isn't it? It's like, I'm going to fight today, and I've also got quality on the deck. And it's interesting that the manager has said that he's trying not to burn Hannibal out. It's what he said the other day. He was like, I'm trying not to overplay him because he's not used to playing twice a week. But he's kind of hinting that he would play him twice a week if he could at the moment. So I think we'll see much more minutes for Manu and Hannibal with Amrabat and Mason Mount. Like, I quietly just kind of happy with some of his work. Like, he's not dynamic, but he does do some of the work in certain zones that I think help you get the ball in the deck and progress it. And I think you have to make this all work together in terms of chemistry.
Yeah, get in the comments and tell us your thoughts on Casemiro. I'm sure people will disagree with what we've said, but
of course I will.
It is what it is. I'm just United have to plan for the next 5 years. They do. They have to make signings that are going to mean that they're not falling to 10th in the league or 12th or 11th in the league after 7 games. They 8 games. They've got to make sure that they're being sensible. They've got to make sure their profiling of players is right. I like the Højlund shout, like more of this. I know they overpaid for Højlund in a sense, and they're probably going to get that because they're Man United. But at the same time, you should have a network. Like we talked about that Brazilian lad the other day, Loran, I think it was. They've been linked with the other Brazilian strikers, Brazilian youngsters as well. That kind of profiling, bring in some players who have a bit of mystery around them because you've actually scouted them properly and you feel like they can contribute to the team and make your team better. Stop jumping for the most expensive flashy names. You've got Jadon Sancho who can't even get in the bloody training ground at the minute. He's watching the under-18s all the time. Another one of these, Rafa Varane as well. He's missed now 35 games. I think it's due to injury since joining in 2021. That's a lot. I know, Rob, you talked in the summer about Kim and how United need to make that signing, and I thought, I don't know. I don't see how they can do it given their financial situation without selling somebody first. But this is the problem. We were going to find that Rafa Varane just absent on an hour's notice or something like that because he can't physically hack it anymore.
Yeah, I think the whole central defence issue for Man United is by like seeing a truck coming from like a mile away and then not deciding to move until it's 1 inch from your nose. That's Man United with the centre-back. So I think the thing is with Varane, we've known this is the way it's gone from last year, from the moment almost he's been at the football club, is that you needed to do something at centre-back to get yourself some coverage. And what did you do? You did Johnny Evans. So, you're stuck with that and you're going to have to use Johnny Evans in those moments to help you get over it. But I think this is the end for Varane as well. Like, I don't want to sound like knee-jerk or over the top, but when a player has lost his use for you as a team, as a club, get rid, move on, get the next player in. It's kind of the Pep Guardiola mentality. That's how I think as well. Yeah, you were good at this, Cancelo, but you're not any good anymore.
Pep does it even before anybody else has noticed.
Exactly, because that's his job.
Alex Ferguson used to do it before anybody else had noticed.
Totally. Look, I can remember Fergie doing it with both Jaap Stam and Ruud van Nistelrooy at a time when the fans were outraged. They were like, Ruud's gone. Why? And he was like, because this is happening and now I want to do this. And that's your job as a manager, to put your neck on the block. And I think for Ten Hag, that's a big lesson in his first, year and a little bit at Man United, is that things can change so quickly, especially with injuries. You can have best laid plans, but you've also got to have plan B, plan C, and plan D. There's no doubt United lack that, and they lack that thought. Now, I'm not saying for 1 second that the manager didn't want to go out and buy Kim Min-jae. I know he did. He wanted that player, and Man United went, no, we ain't got the money at the moment, so we're not doing that one because you want to buy a goalkeeper. It's the manager's choice at the end of the day, isn't it? For that. But Man United need to have a much more robust structure of recruitment. We've said it non-stop here. And I think with Rafa Varane, Scott, I don't think he will go mid-season. Like I think Casemiro might go because he might not be playing. I think Varane will definitely be used towards the end of the season because you haven't got anything better. You need to go and get that centre-back now. You need to go find your Saliba. Yeah, people are talking about Todibo again. Don't know if that's a good comparison. But you need someone, I think, who is younger, fitter, and will give you many more games in their own development at centre-back.
Yeah, I think by the start of next season, I think you'd probably think that both of those players will have been sold. I think.
They'll be gone. And I also think your Maguires will be gone as well. And all the other players around the fringe who have kind of really suffered in terms of trying to get minutes.
Yeah, and that's something you can't. I know everybody wants success yesterday, or they want success this season, this kind of thing. But inevitably, if you can't do your squad transition properly because you're being hamstrung with your ability to sell players by the club or by players themselves, you're not going to progress as much as. And this is why I have sympathy with Ten Hag, because he's not getting exactly everything that he wants. I know that people are saying look at all these players he's signed. His team are playing the same way or his team are his own team now. Look at the back four that lined up the other day. Come on. Like, really? You're telling me that that's what Erik Ten Hag would have chosen from the very beginning? No, that's not what he would have chosen at all.
Totally not. Look, they gave him Mount for a big amount of money. They gave him Onana for a big amount of money. Then they kind of were forced to go and do Højlund, and they did that after 6 months of Weghorst. So that was the way Man United thought that was a good way of progressing to that player. And then you brought Amrabat in right at the end of the window. And this is why I did the Amrabat solution video, because I was thinking, if you didn't have Amrabat now, I think Man United would be in real trouble, because you'd be stuck with Casemiro every week. You'd have to play Casemiro as the 6. And these issues have been there since last season. This is not new, Scott. So if some fans are only picking on it now, this is not brand new stuff. And as you just said there, I think the manager has been backed in terms of total cash outlay, but they certainly haven't done the right business. Like, they haven't looked at it positionally and gone and done the right stuff, because we said if you get 1 or 2 or 3 injuries, you're in trouble. Guess what, Scott? They got 13 injuries. So, then you're stuffed, aren't you? So, Man United, I think that's also gives Ten Hag a little bit of grace, is that the institution will look at that and say, okay, you've lost games, but we can see this. But we also do know that Man United blame managers for all sorts of stuff that maybe isn't their fault.
Do you think that that's still the case, though? Because I look at when that last happened, who did we have? I know, Richard Arnold and John Murtough brought in Ralph Rangnick, right?
Yes.
And I think the transition, that was Ed Woodward before that. I'm pretty sure it was.
It was before that, but didn't they blame Ralph Rangnick for 6 months?
Well, they did, but he was always going to be the fall guy, wasn't he?
Again, I did a show about Gegenpressing and Ralph Rangnick right before when we got him, and I said I would like this guy to come in as the interim, right? So we called that on the masterclass when we were looking at it, and he came in, and as you said, on day one it was really good. We saw some pressing for 20 minutes against Crystal Palace, then we saw nothing. And Ralph Rangnick sat in his pressers constantly and told us, shooting from the hip, this is what's wrong with this team. You need to get rid of this lot and do this. And by the end of his tenure, very prominent Manchester United journalists were blaming Ralph Rangnick for the problem in the dressing room. And the problem was not Ralph Rangnick, and it never was. In the same way that the problem is not Erik Ten Hag. In the same way that the problem wasn't Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So a lot of this is the systemic issues at Man United at the very top. We know that. But then you've got to build a squad sympathetically, and you have to find players in the market that can help you move forward. This is what I think Richard Arnold has not showed to me that he's good at yet. Like, Richard Arnold talks a good talk, talks better than Ed did, definitely. But I'm not seeing it yet. I'm not seeing some magical support for the manager. And I've got no doubt, Scott, if United did continue losing games now, they would sack the manager. I really do. I don't feel that they would stick for him through thick and thin.
My point was that I know I just mentioned that they haven't fully backed Ten Hag, but they have to a point, and they've put
to a point.
Well, but at the same time, like, they're the ones who are going to get. They know full well that they're going to get the heat if Ten Hag goes. I'm sure they do now, because enough fans have seen through it. But they probably have more to lose by sacking Ten Hag rather than sticking by him, for me, because they've signed at massive expense the players that Ten Hag has wanted in certain areas of the pitch, and they haven't given him every single thing. It feels like, to me, this time around, that Arnold, Murtough, and Ten Hag are a kind of, maybe there's some tension in there with the agency that he's using and this kind of thing, but I feel like they will give him every single chance, because they know that they're going to have to do another bloody squad rebuild under another manager's ideas, and it's going to come at great expense to them again when they can't actually afford to do that again. So I feel like United are better off sticking with Ten Hag regardless, and I don't know, maybe Richard Arnold is feeling like that as well.
I think you stick with Richard. I think you stick with Erik Ten Hag. Absolutely, that's my viewpoint on it, and kind of football sensibility side. But if you lose games and the heat builds, they will relieve the pressure by sacking the manager and getting a new manager, because that's what they do. Like you just said there about to lose. What have they got to lose, Scott? They won't lose their jobs at the board. They don't lose their jobs. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't like you failed again. Joel Glazer is not going to sit there and say, well, Richard, come into my office, come over to America and we'll talk about this because your job's on the line. His job's not on the line. His job is not on the line. And this is part of the problem at United, is that this is why you don't get progression. They do things to a playbook, Scott, and the playbook is generally through the press. So, like, if the press heat on Man United is big, they then try and find solutions for that. So if Erik ten Hag, loses this game against Brentford and it's 2 weeks of heat, and then he loses another 3 games, he's guaranteed out. He's gone. They won't stick with him. They won't suck it up and say, no, we're just going to back the manager and see what happens. They would sack him to bring in another name to put a little band-aid on a huge cut in your arm. And that is what they do. They did it all the way from, they've done it. They did it with Moyes, 11 months, not happy with him, move him out. They did it with Van Gaal, 2 years. No, we're not happy with this now. Mourinho, he's the best coach in the world. Did it with Mourinho for like 3 years. No, we don't like. It's not going to back him anymore.
The point I'm trying to make is it's a different person doing it.
Different person doing it, but the same club and the same. That you say it's the same. You say that Ed Woodward is different to Richard Arnold. I think that they're the same thing. They're accountants who came up together, who know each other through Manchester United. I do not give Richard Arnold the football acumen that maybe some people do. I don't believe he understands football any more than Ed Woodward. Ed Woodward wanted a Galactico Man United to sell to the world, and he got that, and he made big sponsorship deals. And I'm sorry, I think Richard Arnold is the same. It's the truth. I think if Richard Arnold wanted to win more, he'd have a director of football that was actually in that real part of the game, like Brighton are, going to find these talents. And John Murtough isn't that. John Murtough's not a bad person, but he's probably not qualified to do this job, being completely truthful in the same way that he. But I believe in Ten Hag. I look at Ten Hag and I actually think he's our kind of director of football. He's the guy who's going to go, we have to build a style of play. We have to buy these types of players. The problem is, Scott, is that they invest to a certain level and then they take the dividends out the football club and then they stop investing for a bit. And that's the cycle. And I don't see anything to me that makes me think anything different to that, unfortunately.
You think.
A repetition for me of ways that they operate that other clubs don't.
I mean, ultimately, nothing's fundamentally going to change until United change ownership, if that happens.
Yeah, or the ownership decides that they have to completely restructure the football side of the business, which would be having a proper director of football, a proper kind of sporting director. And that's what look at Arsenal. It's a good example with Edu and how they do stuff. They kind of had some false starts, but their structure is there to help them. And they went with Saka and they went with Martinelli early with youngsters, didn't they? And they went through the pain barrier to get to where they are now. United have got that opportunity now, Scott, to do that, go through the pain barrier this season, and we can all do that and watch it. But if it goes wrong a little bit, don't collapse and blow the manager up, because that's what they've done in the past. They blame managers for their problems, for the things that they've done at board level.
Let us know what you think. We'll wrap it up there because, there's obviously positive feeling around United after that win over Brentford. But we spent the second half of the show talking about problems that they have to fix because, let's be honest, there are problems to fix. There are a lot of them.
Bit of reality in that, some of that, definitely.
Yeah. So, at least we're not talking under the pressure of 3 consecutive defeats. There's a win, no matter how it came about. Just so happened to be a really enjoyable few minutes, but papers over the cracks for a little bit, and I think United have some work to do over the international break. But Rob, thanks again. We'll wrap it up there. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and watch us on YouTube as well. Like the video, not the channel. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment for us as well on anything we've discussed today. Pop the notification bell on as well so you don't miss a show. And follow us on social media at @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @PromiseLandMU for the show. And we'll see you soon, everyone. Thank you very much for listening to The Promised Land. Have a great week.